Hi, ExecOnline listeners. Today's Stories from the HR Frontline takes you to the other side of the globe to speak with Sembcorp's Chief Human Resource Officer, Wendy Foong. Sembcorp is a global utility leader, headquartered in Singapore, where their HR team is responding on the front line of their organization, balancing the safety of their remote and essential workers on the job. Wendy shares how this climate has catalyzed operational efficiencies and digital transformation for Sembcorp while dealing with the challenges of COVID-19. As they look forward, Sembcorp continues to drive their standard HR responsibilities, such as leadership development, talent reviews, and succession planning, but with a more dynamic and digital approach.
I'm here with Wendy Foong, the Chief Human Resources Officer at Sembcorp. Just wanted to start off, by asking you, how are you doing?
I think everything is going fine. I think considering the circumstances, I think it's been a long time since we've been at this. I've been at home since March, middle of March, so it's coming to 2.5 months already. I'm actually quite looking forward to go back to the office.
Yeah, I can imagine. There are two of us who would like to get back to the office, pretty soon. So tell us, I know Sembcorp has been, affected, pretty strongly by what's been going on. Obviously you're working from home, and tell us a little bit about the journey that you've been on, as an organization, within HR.
So we're based in Singapore, right? And so we really started off in January when we first heard about it in Wuhan, China. But for us, I think we were a little bit in shock. And then we had to sit down together and figure out what we had to do. So I would say I think we were a bit behind the curve when we first started. And it took us maybe about a month to 6 weeks before we kind of got, I would say, on top of it. I can't say that we're ahead of the curve yet because the Singapore government is changing in weeks, and every week or so we get a different set of instructions, and so we had to react to what the requirements are from the government. And at that point in time, globally for us, for the other parts of the world, there was nothing. They were green. Middle East was green, the UK was green, so they're like, oh, nothing going on here. So what's going on in Singapore? And I think for us, it was, and the beginning was really bringing our secondees or our expatriates back home and say Singapore is probably safer. You might want to come back if you're worried. Come back. And then gradually, I think the other countries in India and UK and all that started getting their lockdowns a lot earlier, and Singapore was still in orange. So then they had actually gotten into a much more emergency mode compared to us. But I think we worked together with our security team. So we have our plant security, and they then had already kick-started the split teams in the plants in terms of shift works to be done. And there was exchange within the operations group across all the different markets. So they understood how each plant would want to operate and what could be the most optimal working arrangements to minimize the contagion, but at the same time also not impact our operations, because we're essential services. So we have to keep power running, and we also have to make sure our waste collection business continues as well, because there's still the public need. So I would say up to this point, it's been actually physically quite tiring for us. At the same time, I think we're still very much on alert, meaning there are still a lot to be changed. Singapore is just getting ready to come out of our circuit breaker, which is effectively a lockdown. But then a lot of requirements from the governments are still coming out. So there's quite a bit of preparation work to be done. And then all of that employee engagement and a lot of other considerations starts to come in because of the prolonged period of actually working remotely.
Yeah, I'm very curious. One of the things that we talk about a lot is trying to make decisions under uncertainty. And how do you kind of think about decision making as a leadership group when there's so much uncertainty going on in a situation?
I would say I think we need to understand our principles and we need to understand where our priorities are. I think if you're guided by these two things, it might become at least more consistent. Whether or not we make the right or wrong decision, but we would be at least a bit more consistent. You have cross-functional teams, and We have the expertise from the risk function. We've got HR, of course, and we've got the operations team. And we've all come from also very different backgrounds. So we do have quite a new leadership team as well. And I think our different backgrounds and where in the companies that we've been coming from helps us with a bit of diversity in that sense. And I would say I'm probably one of those that's a little bit more urgent in terms of I think what needs to get done and need to get done fast. And we need to consider, what's the right thing to do. I think that whole variety of it helps us to balance in terms of just listening to each other and what we think ultimately would be the best solution going forward. And because we don't have a lot of time to decide on what the course of action will be, so at some point we will just have to converge into say, okay, so we're going to decide to do A, B, C, D, and that's it. Next day, communications go out. I think that has actually been a change for the company, I would have to say.
And that's a great perspective in terms of thinking about the principles. What kind of challenges have you had?
So our journey is quite interesting, I have to say, because as mainly a utilities company, so we're mainly in the energy business. We do have some other businesses as well in urban as well and construction. We would be characterized as industries that I would say would be quite slow to change. We are not one of those that's high tech, that's already in the forefront, but we've actually invested in quite a bit of technology within the company because that was already a strategy going forward, but that would be an introduction of a change for us. And as a result of that, the organization have had to transform itself, and we are still in the transformation journey. So the one thing that was good that came out of COVID, I would have to say, is that it really catalyzed the entire change. And I had already warned my chief digital officer, just as we are coming into DOSCON Orange, and I said, look, it's just a matter of time when split teams turn into full work from home. So can you guys make sure that our bandwidth is sufficient, your backend servers are sufficient and all that? Just make sure that you're ready for 80-90% to go complete work from home, right? And just the beginning of this year, I had gone to the leadership team to even introduce, flexible working arrangements, things that are, I would say, they are not rocket science, but for Sembcorp, it's actually quite a new introduction. And there was still quite a bit of nervousness around the leadership team. And lo and behold, right now we get crash calls on teleconferencing, we get crash calls on work from home. And actually it was an opportunity, I would say, then I get feedback from people like, I've never really worked from home, but hey, you know what? I like it. It's been pretty productive. And we started doing polls as well. So in a way, we invested in technology that was purposeful, but I think we are lucky in the sense that now we have an opportunity to really use it. And thankfully, we did invest in those technologies. So getting onto the technology was no issue at all. The challenge was that many of our processes were still manual. In many departments that were still in that change mode. And so when we polled the employees and we asked, have you had to change your process as a result of this change in work arrangement? And 80% of the people that we polled said yes. So I think it forced them. But I think now that we look back and we look at it and we will say that actually the realization is actually we've always had the tools, we've always had the capability to transform into a digital organization. We just didn't have the willingness. And look, you have an external event that's just made it necessary to make that change. And I don't think we're ever going to go back. I don't think we're going to go such prolonged work from home either.
So it sounds like you feel like you've achieved some efficiencies and productivity might have actually improved, or is it too soon to tell?
Yes, I definitely see it as an opportunity. I'm personally a bit more of an optimist anyway. And I do have a background coming from high-tech software companies. So to me, it's not something that's impossible to achieve. It's just different ways of working. And a lot of it's really mindset shifts. I will say that what this has also uncovered, naturally, business has also been impacted. The power demand has also reduced. So on a more serious note, certainly our financials will be impacted. And as a result of that, we are also reacting to it and looking at how we achieve efficiencies across the organization and cost cutting without trying to hit the employees first. I think there are various aspects to look at. So some of the realization that's come would certainly be that definitely a need to now review our manpower plan. And they've realized that, hey, you know what? Now that we're still running full steam, right? Our power plants are all running in full steam, but we've not had the luxury of having everybody in the plant. So two things have happened. Number one, any lost time injury and such has drastically reduced because people are not in the plant, so they are not actually exposed to the dangerous areas. And the plant's still running. And secondly, there's not much overtime anymore because of the split teams, of the work arrangements that's been done, and we've had to reduce the number of people in the plant because of safe distancing, etc. But the plant's still running. I think they've started to realize that, hey, maybe we're not as optimal as we thought we were, and we could be even more, more optimizing in terms of our manpower resources. So I think that's definitely an opportunity that they are currently looking at as we are starting to do planning for next year as well. Well, I think that it's uncovered quite a few opportunities, I would say.
Yep, and love that. And so when you think about learnings for the organization, obviously, it feels like we've covered, some in terms of new processes, efficiencies, learning that we can work from home and all those things. But what other learnings maybe are there for the organization? Then maybe for you as well, as you've, had your own sort of personal journey going through this crisis.
I think the biggest lesson here is really resilience, right? I will start with myself. I won't pride myself as a very resilient person, but I certainly thought I was more resilient than this. I think while we still had to plan for the work that had to be done and look ahead and really plan for all the different scenarios, I personally had to deal with. I think it's not quite the same as working from home. So some people tell me, oh, so this is what work from home really is. I say, actually, it's not. Because when you work from home, you're usually still allowed to go outside. You're still allowed to go elsewhere. And I wouldn't necessarily work from home every day of the week because I only choose days where I would either want to concentrate or that it's mainly full day of calls. Then we would do that. But I think there's also a bit of a sadness in the air and also anxiety because of the virus, because there's still worry in the society. And I think, and the prolonged just being away from my team and from people, I've had to deal with it myself. So I think overcoming that own tendency to feel a bit down during the day, still being able to focus on what needs to get done. I mean, that really is, I would say, a personal stretch for me during this period of time. I think as an organization, I think we've learned to use virtual technology a lot better. We realized that, video conference versus a virtual call is very different because for the first time I see everybody's faces up front, no matter where they are. It's actually a more real sense of closeness than looking through video conference screen, with some people in the room. Actually was more intimate and more effective. We've also done, so we pressed on ahead with our initiatives, our talent review that's coming up. We had to train our managers on talent development, and we did it now in a virtual format. And we've managed to get people that you normally can't find time to come to a face-to-face training. And they actually were able to attend because it was virtual. And because it's virtual, we've tried to make it a maximum of 2 hours. And they actually found it very engaging. And there was very positive feedback that came out from that training. So which meant that I think both facilitators as well as attendees enjoyed that experience. So I think we're going to do more of that actually going forward.
Yep. And speaking of learning then, so how do you, in this kind of new virtual world that we're in, how do you expect learning, to kind of change at Sembcorp?
I would say that I think the acceptance of virtual learning is going to be higher. I think now that people have experienced it, but virtual learning does not have to be one directional, can be very interactive. I've been involved in training that has also been hybrid in nature. So in my previous organizations, we may not be impacted by COVID, but we would have been impacted by cost cutting, which means restriction of travel. Every Q4, you'll get restriction of travel. Restriction of travel means no face-to-face training, and we will be challenged to say, still do the training, but try and find a format where you don't have to travel, but still engage. And we've actually found hybrid very, very possible. A lot of people involved, but still equally engaging, high energy, and very, very demanding at the same time. So I think there's still a long way to go that we could achieve in terms of virtual learning and just changing the experience. And I think it's made the company a bit more agile in terms of being unafraid to try something new just because they've not tried it before. I think they're now willing to kind of step in. So I think it's an opportunity. I think learning will evolve for sure.
And what are your key areas of focus right now?
I will say that we're trying to, well, focus on COVID, but at the same time, let it not be an area of focus. So that's an area we're trying to kind of like manage, but let's not spend our time, all of our time in risk management. But rather, I think we're starting to continue on our key priorities, at least from a HR side. I think number one will be definitely the workforce planning. We're looking at capabilities, so that continues. So we continue now to look at what are the capabilities we need to build, which are the capabilities we need to switch. In terms of leadership and managerial skills have been quite key for us in terms of a game changer. We're continuing that, so that's why I mentioned about the training. We're not stopping it, but we turn it into virtual training, although we still prefer a face-to-face learning for some aspects of it, because you do need that interaction, you do need that mentorship, and the exchange, in terms of experience for our leaders to help them become more equipped with more modern skills in terms of people management. I think that continues to be our focus. Career development and succession planning also continues to be our focus. And we're right smack in that season that we're supposed to be doing all of these activities. So we're still continuing with that focus.
How do you keep employees engaged?
Well, I think there's a lot to be done, and then the multiple dimensions. And that's why we're all very, very busy. And still, I don't think we've covered all of the dimensions well. The very first one, of course, is that we've decided that we will have a singular channel of communication for our employees so that they could come to this place all the time. We started doing daily communication since the beginning of the crisis to our employees. They were very keen to first understand what's the situation. So globally, we actually do our count. How many positive cases have we had? How many in quarantine? How many have been discharged? So people look out for those because those are signals as to whether we're improving. Is this going to end or not? So we do that reporting, but at the same time, we've been giving out quite a bit of tips daily. So whether it's exercising, whether it's how do you manage your home front, how do you put your router so that you get better Wi-Fi access. That's the latest one. And different sites. How do you go on vacation? Please go on vacation. So that's one. That's daily. We've also done a couple of pulses to find out how people are doing. So we get a sense that people may not still feel very safe, especially the ones that are still out there in the plants. Even though we've done what we could. So I think it's really finding out why they feel so. People at home are equally very stressed out, so we've started putting programs there as well to help any form of counseling that's needed. But people staying at home, the levels of anxiety has actually gone up. We also find out how they're working from home, how work from home has been, etc. Then we started to switch our recreation club to focus on activities that were more virtual. So we've done the virtual yogas, the virtual exercise sessions. So at some point we're like, were we over communicating? So should we stop, right? Should we maybe reduce the frequency? And one day they were delayed just a little bit and employees were asking, where's your email? So I think employees are looking forward to keep in touch and to find out what's going on in the organization and keep engaged. We also have a Slack channel. So the Slack channel has also run campaigns like what stay positive. So what keeps you positive? So people have been sharing just what they've been doing and what helps them stay positive as well. So we've been running a few parallel campaigns, and that's been quite resource intensive, I would say.
And so finally, what advice about responding to this new normal would you give Chief Human Resources officers?
Well, I think it's very hard to say to give any advice because I think we're all in it together. And I actually see, I will say the HR fraternity actually reacting very well. I've joined many sessions with many HR community members, and I think we've pretty much done a lot of very, very similar things. I will say, I think if we can continue to share ideas, there's always a lot to do. There's another angle, which is actually reaching out to the community. I think my personal journey has been okay, look beyond yourself and then start to look beyond your team and then look beyond your company and then look into society. And I think that's been the journey and the speed at which you do that. And personally, you have to overcome it in order to kind of just change your perspective and change your viewpoint and start, looking out for others as opposed to just looking inwards to yourself. I think that's all I can say.
Great. Well, thank you, Wendy, for all of your great perspectives and for sharing your journey with us today. Fantastic insights from you. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
This has been another episode of Stories from the HR Frontline, brought to you by ExecOnline. Special thanks to Wendy Foong and to you for tuning in. Listen to more stories on demand by going to our website, execonline.com/HRFrontline, or follow ExecOnline on LinkedIn for the latest updates. Interested in sharing your story? Email us at stories@execonline.com. Stay well and stay safe.